Earth. Most people don't lose respect because they're weak. They lose it because they say too much, justify too much, and tolerate far more than they should. Here's the reality no one really tells you. Your worth is not decided when you speak. It's defined by what you allow. Not in your words, not in your intentions, but in your actions. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because people are always observing you. Not when you're performing, but when you're being tested. And in those quiet moments, you are teaching them exactly how to treat you. Silence is one of the most misunderstood tools in human behavior. Most people assume silence means you have nothing to say. In truth, silence often means you understand more than you're willing to reveal. And that difference changes everything. Because the average person is predictable. They react quickly. They defend instantly. They rush to fill every gap in conversation because silence makes them uneasy. But here's what you need to understand. The person who controls silence controls the interaction. Let's break this down psychologically. When someone says something disrespectful, dismissive, or provocative, they are not just speaking words. They, Earth, are testing limits. They are asking, without saying it directly, how far can I go with you? Will you react emotionally? Can I influence your state? And most people fail this test immediately. They argue. They explain. They try to win the moment. But in doing so, they unknowingly give away power. Why does that happen? Because emotional reactions signal investment without control. Clears throat, and the moment you show that, you become easier to influence. Now, compare that with silence. Not awkward silence, not passive silence, but controlled silence, intentional silence, observant silence. When you pause instead of reacting, something very interesting happens. You interrupt the expected pattern. The other person is waiting for a reaction. And when it doesn't come, they become aware of themselves. They start questioning. Did I say too much? Why aren't they reacting? Am I losing control here? This is called a pattern interrupt, and it's one of the most powerful psychological tools you can use. But silence isn't just about what you don't say. It's about what you're doing internally. Because real silence is not empty. It's active. You're observing tone. You're reading intention. And your Earth. Analyzing behavior. Instead of getting pulled into the emotion of the moment, you step outside of it. That's where clarity exists. And clarity gives you something most people don't have: choice. Let me give you a simple example. Someone criticizes you unfairly in a group setting. Most people will jump in immediately. That's not true. You don't understand. Let me explain. But a higher level response looks different. You pause. You hold eye contact. You let the silence stretch just enough to create tension. And then, if you choose to speak, you respond briefly and precisely, or sometimes not at all. Because here's the truth. Not every statement deserves a response. Some deserve distance. Another key principle is that silence pushes people to reveal more. When you don't rush to fill the gap, the other person often will. They begin talking more, explaining more, sometimes even contradicting themselves. Why does this happen? Because silence creates psychological pressure. Humans are wired to seek resolution in conversations. When that resolution is delayed, discomfort increases. And in that discomfort, people expose their real thoughts. Now, let's address the biggest misconception. Whoa. Earth. Not people think you're weak if you stay silent. Number. They think you're weak when you can't control yourself. There's a difference. Weakness is reacting impulsively. Strength is choosing your response deliberately. In fact, controlled silence often signals high status. Why? Because high-value individuals don't feel the need to prove themselves in every moment. They don't rush. They don't chase validation. They don't argue for approval. Their restraint communicates something powerful. I don't need this moment to go my way. And that level of detachment is rare. But silence doesn't mean avoidance. This part is important. You're not staying silent because you're afraid. You're staying silent because you're selective. When something truly matters, you speak clearly, calmly, and directly. And because you don't speak all the time, your words carry more weight when you do. That's the trade-off. Less noise, more impact. Here's how to start applying this immediately. First, slow down your reactions. When something triggers you, don't respond instantly. Give yourself a few seconds. That pause alone will separate you from most people. Second, become comfortable with silence in conversations. Earth. You don't need to fill every gap. Let moments breathe. You'll notice people revealing more around you. Third, observe before interpreting. Instead of assuming intent, watch behavior patterns. Silence gives you time to gather real information instead of reacting to assumptions. Over time, something begins to shift. You become harder to read, harder to influence. And people feel that. They may not be able to explain it, but they adjust around you. They become more careful, more respectful, more aware. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior trained them. At the highest level, silence becomes more than a tool. It becomes a form of presence. You are no longer trying to dominate conversations. You influence them without effort because you understand something most people never learn. Power is not in saying more. Power is in needing to say less. There is another hidden behavior that quietly destroys respect faster than almost anything else. And most people don't even realize they are doing it. It's not weakness. It's not lack of intelligence. It's the need for approval. At first, it seems harmless. You want to be liked. You want to be understood. You want your efforts to be worth noticed. That's human. But here's where it becomes dangerous. When your decisions start changing based on how others might react, you are no longer living. You are performing. Let's break this down psychologically. Every time you seek approval, you are doing something subtle but powerful. You are outsourcing your self-worth. You are saying, without words, I need you to validate me. Your opinion defines how I feel about myself. I will adjust if it means you accept me. And people pick up on this instantly, not consciously but behaviorally. Humans are extremely sensitive to status signals. We are constantly reading confidence, certainty, and emotional stability. When someone constantly seeks approval, it sends a clear signal. This person is unsure of themselves, and uncertainty lowers perceived value. Now, here's the paradox. The more you try to be liked, the less you are respected. Because respect is not built on compliance. It is built on self-trust. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who agrees with everything, never says no, constantly explains themselves, and seeks reassurance before making decisions? At first, they seem nice, but over time, you stop taking them seriously. Why? Because they don't appear grounded in their own identity. They are shaped by the room they are in, and that makes them predictable and easy to overlook. Now, compare that to someone who doesn't chase approval. They are calm and certain. They don't rush to explain every choice. If they disagree, they say it without aggression. If they decide something, they stand by it without apology. That person feels different. Why? Because they are internally validated. Here's the key principle. When you stop needing approval, people start giving it. Not because you asked, but because you no longer depend on it. Let's go deeper. Approval-seeking behavior often shows up in subtle ways. Over-explaining your decisions, apologizing when you did nothing wrong, changing your opinion to match others, feeling uncomfortable when someone disagrees, constantly checking how people perceive you. These behaviors seem small, but together they create a pattern, and patterns are what people respond to. From a psychological standpoint, this is tied to validation dependency. Your brain begins associating external approval with internal reward. A compliment boosts your mood. A negative reaction lowers it. Verb time, your emotional state becomes controlled by others. And that's where you lose power. Because if someone can control how you feel, they can influence how you behave. Now, shift the frame. Stopping the need for approval doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop needing their agreement to function. There is a difference. You can respect opinions without being controlled by them. You can listen without adjusting your identity. You can connect without losing yourself. This is where real confidence begins. Not loud confidence, not performative confidence, but stable confidence. The kind that does not fluctuate based on reactions. Here's what shifts when you stop seeking approval. First, your communication becomes more precise. You stop over-explaining. Instead of long justifications, you rely on clear statements. Instead of trying to convince everyone, you express your point and move forward. This makes your words carry more weight. Second, your decisions become quicker. You're no longer filtering every choice through, what will they think? Instead, you ask, is this right for me? That shift alone increases clarity and removes hesitation. Third, your presence could be hinges. People can sense when someone is not chasing validation. There's less tension, less neediness, less emotional instability. You become easier to respect because you're harder to influence. Now, let's address something important. When you stop seeking approval, not everyone will like it. In fact, some people will respond negatively. Why? Because your behavior used to be predictable. You used to agree, adjust, and accommodate, and now you don't. That disrupts their expectations. Some may call you different, distant, or difficult, but look closer. Most of the time, what they're really saying is, I can't control you the way I used to. And that's not a loss, that's progress. So, How do you actually break this pattern? Start with awareness. Notice when you're about to over-explain, seek reassurance, or shift your opinion just to fit in. Pause in that moment. Ask yourself, would I still do this if no one's opinion mattered? That question exposes the truth instantly. Next, practice small acts of independence. Say what you actually think. Make decisions without polling everyone. Let people disagree with you without correcting yourself. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. That's not worth, Mal. You're breaking a habit that's been reinforced over time. And finally, accept this, not everyone will approve of you, and they're not supposed to, because approval from the wrong people is often a distraction from the right path. At the highest level, this becomes simple. You stop trying to be accepted everywhere and start being aligned with yourself. Because the truth is, confidence is not built when everyone agrees with you. It's built when you're okay with the fact that they don't. And the moment you truly understand that, you stop chasing approval and start attracting respect. If there's one behavior that instantly changes how people treat you, it's this: boundaries. Not aggressive ones, not emotional ones, but clear, consistent, enforced boundaries. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. You don't get disrespected randomly. You get disrespected gradually and then repeatedly based on what you allow, because people are always testing limits. Not always consciously, but behaviorally. They push a little, observe your reaction, and then decide how far they can go next time. This is how patterns are formed. Not through one big moment, but through small, tolerated behavior. Birth, VRs. A joke you didn't like but ignored. A request you didn't want to accept but agreed to. A line that felt wrong, but you stayed quiet. Each time it happens, you send a signal. This is acceptable. And once something becomes acceptable, it becomes expected. Now, let's break this down psychologically. Humans operate on reinforcement. Whatever behavior is allowed without consequence gets repeated. Whatever behavior is met with resistance gets adjusted. It's that simple. So, when you don't set boundaries, you're not being kind. You're training people to ignore your limits. And over time, that leads to something deeper: resentment. Because now you feel disrespected, but you were part of the pattern that created it. This is where most people get stuck. They think boundaries require confrontation. They imagine conflict, tension, awkwardness, so they avoid it. But here's the reality: the strongest boundaries are not loud. They are clear and consistent. A boundary is not explaining your entire reasoning, getting emotional, or trying to make the other person understand. A boundary is simply a decision about what you will and will not tolerate, followed by aligned action. Let's make it. Earth, as practical. Someone repeatedly wastes your time. An approval-seeking response sounds like, "No problem, I understand, it's okay." A boundary-based response sounds like, "I'm not available for that." Short, clear, final. No over-explaining, no guilt. Here's why this works. Clarity removes negotiation. When you over-explain, you invite debate. When you stay simple, you create structure. And people respect structure, even if they don't like it. Another key principle is this: boundaries without enforcement are just suggestions. This is where most people fail. They say no, but then give in. They express discomfort, but stay anyway. They draw a line and then erase it themselves. And the message that sends is powerful. My words don't carry weight. Consistency is what builds credibility. When your actions match your words repeatedly, people adjust. Not because you forced them, but because your behavior made the rules clear. Now, let's address the emotional side. Why do people struggle with boundaries? Because of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as difficult. So, instead of setting limits, they sacrifice themselves to maintain peace. But here's the problem: if you don't protect your time and energy, someone else will use it. And over time, this creates imbalance. You give more than you receive. You tolerate more than you should. You stay longer than you want. And eventually, you feel drained. Boundaries fix this. Not by pushing people away, but by filtering who gets access to you. Because not everyone deserves the same level of your time, attention, or energy. And when you treat everyone the same, you lower your own value. Here's something most people don't realize: people respect what they can lose. If your presence is always available, always accommodating, always forgiving, there's no risk in mistreating you. But the moment you become willing to walk away, everything changes. Let's talk about that. Walking away is the strongest boundary. Not arguing, not convincing, simply leaving. Because it shows something words never can. I value myself more than I value this situation. And that message is understood instantly. Now, does this mean you become cold or distant? Number. It means you become intentional. You still show kindness. You still support people, but not at the cost of your self-respect. There's also a deeper layer to this. Boundary. Earth. They are not just external, they are internal. It's how you speak to yourself, what you tolerate from your own habits, what standards you hold when no one is watching. Because if you don't respect your own limits, no one else will. So, how do you start building boundaries? First, identify where you feel tension. Frustration is a signal. It usually means a boundary is missing. Second, simplify your communication. Stop over-explaining. Use clear, direct language. I'm not okay with that. That doesn't work for me. I'm going to pass. No story, no justification. Third, follow through. If someone crosses the line, act. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just consistently. That's what builds respect. And finally, accept this. Not everyone will like your boundaries. Some people benefited from you not having them. And when you change, they lose that advantage. But the right people adjust. They respect you more. They take you seriously. They value your presence. At the highest level, boundaries become effortless. You don't have to defend them. You don't have to explain them. You live them. Because you understand something most people don't. Respect is not something you ask for, it's something. Earth. You allow or refuse through your behavior. Most people believe confidence is what you show when things are going well, but that's not confidence. That's confidence. That's comfort. Real confidence is revealed in one place only: pressure. When something goes wrong, when someone disrespects you, when emotions rise and tension fills the moment, that's when your true level shows. Because in those moments, you're not thinking strategically. You're reacting automatically. Let's break this down. The human brain is wired for survival, not control. When you feel attacked physically or emotionally, your system shifts into a reactive state. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, your focus narrows, and most importantly, your ability to think clearly drops. This is why people say things they regret, why arguments escalate, and why small situations turn into lasting damage. Now, here's the key. Calmness is not the absence of emotion, it is control over emotional expression. You still feel anger, you still feel frustration, but instead of reacting instantly, you manage the response. This is where power begins, because the person who controls their reaction controls the direction of the interaction. And Earth, tie-in. Let's look at what happens when you don't stay calm. Someone challenges you. You react quickly. Your tone shifts. Your words become sharper. Now, the situation is no longer about the issue. It becomes about the emotion. And once emotion takes over, logic disappears. But when you stay calm, something very different begins to happen. You slow the moment down. You create space between stimulus and response. And inside that space, you gain something rare: choice. From a psychological perspective, calmness creates a power imbalance. Here's why. In any interaction, the more emotionally reactive person is easier to influence. They are predictable, they are readable, they are controllable. But the calm person is none of those things. When you remain composed, you become harder to figure out, harder to provoke, harder to manipulate. And that uncertainty shifts the dynamic in your favor. Let's make this practical. Imagine someone speaks to you with disrespect. The expected reaction is emotional. Defend yourself, raise your voice, match their intensity. That's what most people do. But a calm response breaks the pattern. You maintain steady eye contact. Your tone stays even. Your words earth, remeasured, or sometimes you don't respond right away at all. This creates a psychological disruption. The other person is prepared for conflict, but instead, they're met with control. Now, they have to adjust. Here's another important layer. Calmness communicates confidence without saying a word, because when you don't react emotionally, you send a signal. I'm not threatened. I'm in control of myself. This situation doesn't define me. And people feel that not logically, but instinctively. Now, let's address a common mistake. People confuse calmness with passivity. They think staying calm means allowing disrespect. That's not what this is. You can be calm and still be firm. For example, instead of reacting emotionally, you say, "That's not acceptable." Calm tone, direct eye contact, no extra words. That response carries more weight than anger ever could. Why? because it's controlled and control signals strength. There's also a long-term effect of staying calm. People start associating you with stability. In chaotic environments, this becomes rare, and rare traits attract attention and respect. In workplaces, families, and social circles, people naturally look toward the person who doesn't panic, the one who doesn't escalate, the one who stays clear when others become emotional. That person becomes a reference point, a leader without needing the title. Now, let's go deeper. Calmness is built, not assumed. You don't just decide to be calm in a difficult moment. You train for it. It starts with awareness. You learn to recognize your internal signals: tightness in your chest, faster breathing, rising tension. These are early warnings, and if you catch them early, you can intervene. Second, you slow down your physiology. Take a breath, pause your speech, relax your posture. These small adjustments send signals back to your brain that you're not in danger, and that helps regulate your response. Third, you reframe the situation. Instead of thinking this is an attack, you shift your perspective. You think, this is information. Now, you're observing instead of reacting. This shift alone changes everything because observers stay calm while reactors don't. There's also a strategic advantage here. When you stay calm, you gather more data. You notice patterns. You understand intent. You see what others miss, and that makes your response more effective if you choose to respond at all. Over time, something interesting happens. People stop trying to provoke you. Not because they instantly respect you, but because it doesn't work. And when behavior doesn't get the reaction it expects, it fades. At the highest level, calmness becomes your default. Not forced, not performed, but natural. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to win every moment. You simply maintain control of yourself and let that control shape the outcome. Because in the end, this is what most people never understand. Anyone can react. Very few can remain composed, and that difference is where respect is built. That's where influence begins, and that's where real power exists. There's a psychological principle most people ignore. People don't treat you based on who you are. They treat you based on what you reinforce. Every time you tolerate disrespect, you reinforce it. Every time you over-explain, you signal insecurity. Every time you chase validation, you lower your perceived value. But when you shift your behavior, you reprogram how people see you. Silence creates mystery. Boundaries create structure. Calmness creates authority. And self-respect creates influence. This ISN, T about manipulation. It's about alignment. When your actions match your self-worth, people feel it. Not intellectually, but psychologically. And that's when everything changes. Because the world doesn't respond to who you say you are. It responds to what you consistently demonstrate. So the real question isn't, do people respect me? The real question is, what am I teaching them every single day? At some point, you stop explaining yourself. You stop proving your worth. You stop chasing people who don't see you. And instead, you become someone who is understood without speaking, respected without demanding, valued without begging. Because your behavior becomes your message and your presence becomes your standard.